It begins with a question, so simple, yet so quietly unsettling. If happiness cannot be given, bought, or found, where does it come from? Imagine a morning before the world wakes. The light hasn't yet decided whether to enter the room. There's just you and the sound of your own breath. No messages, no noise, no validation. Only presence. For a moment, the absence of distraction feels uncomfortable, almost painful, because in that stillness, something asks you to look closer. Not at your achievements, not at the faces that once defined your worth, but at the quiet engine behind every act, every choice, every smile. Happiness, said the Dalai Lama, is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. Yet how many of us wait for it to arrive like mail that never comes? We scroll, we chase, we build, and call it progress. But progress toward what? Somewhere between desire and disappointment, we forget that happiness isn't hidden in life. It is life, when lived with awareness. And perhaps that's the secret most of us miss. Happiness was never meant to be received. It was meant to be practiced, moment by moment, act by act, breath by breath. So, what happens when we stop searching and start creating our own joy? We live in an age where happiness has become both the goal and the illusion. Every advertisement whispers, "You deserve to be happy." Every screen flashes someone smiling brighter, traveling farther, achieving faster. And somewhere deep inside, we begin to believe that happiness is a destination, a place where the light always stays on and nothing hurts anymore. But look closer. The more we chase it, the further it slips away. We buy more, yet feel emptier. We connect more, yet grow lonelier. We know more, yet understand less. It is the great paradox of modern life. The easier it becomes to live, the harder it feels to simply be. There was a time when happiness was woven into the rhythm of ordinary days. It lived in the steam of morning tea, in the creak of a wooden floor, in the pause between heartbeats as the wind brushed across your face. Now we measure it through pixels, through likes, through fleeting affirmations that vanish as quickly as they arrive. We have replaced being with appearing, and in that exchange, we've lost something quiet, but sacred, the ability to act with intention, to choose meaning over motion, to feel rather than perform. We say we want peace, but we fill every silence with noise. We say we want connection, but we fear showing our truest selves. We say we want freedom, but we cling to routines that numb us. It's strange, isn't it? We've never had more options to shape our lives, and yet we've never felt less in control of them. Perhaps it's because we've mistaken happiness for comfort. We think the absence of pain means the presence of joy. But comfort can dull us just as easily as pain can sharpen us. Without challenge, we stagnate. Without effort, our actions lose weight. The Dalai Lama's words, "Happiness comes from your own actions," carry an ancient kind of rebellion. They remind us that joy is not a mood to wait for, but a muscle to be trained. That happiness is not a condition of what happens to us, but what flows from us, in how we choose to act, think, and give. Every act of kindness becomes a form of self-liberation. Every mindful breath is an act of quiet resistance against a world that measures worth in motion. And every moment of awareness is a return to the only thing we truly control, ourselves. Maybe happiness isn't about adding more. Maybe it's about subtracting what clouds the soul. The noise, the rush, the endless comparison. Because somewhere beneath all that, there's a space untouched by the world's noise, a stillness waiting to be remembered. And in that stillness, we begin to see what we've forgotten. Happiness isn't the result of a perfect life. It's the reflection of a conscious one. So the question becomes, if happiness is born from our actions, what kind of life are our actions creating? The greatest misunderstanding about happiness is that it's something that happens to us, as though life were a slot machine, and one day we finally pull the lever just right. But happiness has never been an accident. It's an art form, the art of inner participation. Think about how we move through our days. We wake up, check our phones, react to a dozen tiny digital fires before breakfast. We rush through tasks, thinking efficiency is the same as purpose. We reach for pleasure because it's easier than peace. And by the end of the day, we wonder why we feel hollow, even when everything looks fine. We've built lives filled with activity, but starved of meaning. We've forgotten that happiness is not a feeling we pursue, but a state we allow. It's not created by intensity, but by alignment. When our actions mirror our values, when our effort flows towards something that matters, when our heart is quietly at peace with the direction of its motion, that is happiness in its purest form. It's not the loud laughter at a party, but the quiet satisfaction after doing something kind. It's not the applause from others, but the inner smile that whispers, "I live true today." The Dalai Lama's words remind us of something profoundly simple. Joy is the natural result of living in harmony with what is right. Not what is easy, not what is popular, but what is true. And yet truth is uncomfortable. To act consciously means confronting our own contradictions. We say we value love, but we hold grudges. We say we value peace, but we stir noise. We say we value honesty, but we wear masks so often that we forget our real face. Happiness does not come from removing discomfort. It comes from moving through it with awareness. Because every act of presence, no matter how small, is an act of creation. It's a choice to return to the only thing real, this moment, right here. Consider the rhythm of a simple day. You wake, breathe, eat, walk, speak, rest. Each action can be mechanical, or it can be mindful. One is survival, the other is aliveness. To act consciously is to see life not as a series of tasks, but as a series of sacred opportunities. To wash a dish with attention. To speak a kind word without agenda. To walk slower and notice the air. This is not naivete. It's mastery. Because it reclaims the only space we truly control, the space between stimulus and response. And within that space, happiness breathes. The mind will always wander. It will measure, compare, demand. But beneath it all, awareness is still, like a lake beneath a storm. When we act from that stillness, something changes. We begin to notice that joy doesn't depend on conditions. It's not given by the world. It's expressed through us. Pain will still exist. Loss will still visit. But even within those, a quiet wisdom emerges. We cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose the meaning we give it. And meaning, when embraced with compassion, transforms pain into purpose. That's why the happiest people aren't those with the easiest lives. They're the ones who give their lives the deepest meaning. They don't chase constant comfort. They cultivate constant clarity. So what does it mean to act our way into happiness? It means practicing awareness like a musician practices a note, over and over, until presence becomes rhythm, until kindness becomes instinct, until gratitude becomes breath. It means asking before every action, will this expand me or will it shrink me? Will this feed my peace or my ego? Because every choice, no matter how invisible, tilts the balance between inner light and inner noise. The beauty of this truth is that it restores power where it belongs, within. If happiness comes from our own actions, then we are never truly powerless. Even when the world falls apart, we can still choose awareness. We can still choose compassion. We can still choose to participate in life rather than hide from it. Happiness, then, is not a reward. It's a reflection. It reflects what we nurture and what we neglect. It grows in the soil of effort, humility, and awareness. And like a plant, it must be tended, not demanded. So perhaps the real question is not, how do I become happy, but what actions am I repeating that keep me from it? The world teaches us to chase results. Philosophy teaches us to honor process. And in between them lies the human experience, messy, beautiful, uncertain, alive. In that space, we rediscover something sacred. Happiness is not the absence of suffering. It's the presence of meaning, despite it. It's the light that keeps flickering, not because the wind is kind, but because the flame refuses to die. And maybe that's what the Dalai Lama meant all along, that happiness is less about what we receive and more about what we give away. Through attention, through compassion, through the courage to live with open eyes, even when it hurts. Because the act of living consciously is the act of creating joy. So the next time you ask, how do I find happiness? Pause and ask instead, what am I creating with my every action right now? There once was a man who lived in a small mountain village surrounded by mist and silence. He was known not for wealth nor wisdom, but for his restlessness. Each morning he would wake before dawn, climb the same worn trail, and stare at the horizon. When asked why, he always said, "I'm waiting for happiness to arrive." He believed happiness was like the sunrise, a thing that would eventually appear if he waited long enough. So he built a chair at the edge of the cliff and sat there every day, through rain, wind, and years that quietly passed. One morning, an old monk stopped beside him. "You've been here a long time," the monk said softly. The man nodded. "I'm waiting for happiness. I've done everything right. I've worked, prayed, sacrificed. But still, it hasn't come." The monk smiled, as though hearing a child ask where the wind sleeps. Then he picked up a nearby stone and handed it to the man. "Hold this," he said, "and every time you breathe, lift it once." The man frowned. How could this help? "Try it," the monk said, "until the sun sets." Frost. 2012. Reventure of the Models discussed. So he did. Hour after hour, breath after breath, the stone rose and fell in his hands. At first it felt meaningless, then exhausting, then strangely peaceful. By evening, his arms trembled. The stone felt heavier than before, yet his mind was lighter. When the monk returned, he asked, "What did you learn?" The man looked down at the stone and whispered, "I stopped waiting for happiness to arrive. I started doing something, even if it was simple." The monk nodded. Happiness is like this stone. It grows lighter when carried with awareness, heavier when carried with expectation. And before he left, he said one final thing. Those who seek happiness as a destination will wait forever. Those who build it through mindful action are already there. The man never waited on the cliff again. Instead, he began planting small trees along the trail. One by one, season after season, he cared for them. Villagers began to notice. A path once barren now bloomed green with new life, and they would often see him smile quietly as he worked, not because his life was perfect, but because in his labor, his heart finally rested. Years later, children would play beneath the shade of his trees, and sometimes travelers passing through the village would pause at the cliff's edge and see the old wooden chair still standing, empty, facing the sunrise. They'd ask about it, and someone would say, that belonged to the man who stopped waiting for happiness. And as the story spread, people began to understand something he had lived, not spoken. That happiness was never something the world delivered. It was something we practiced, quietly, in how we chose to love, give, forgive, and stay present, even when no one was watching. Because happiness, like those trees, takes time. Each seed is an action, each action a moment of awareness. And over years, those moments grow roots deeper than any passing emotion. The man's garden still stands, long after he is gone. And every morning when the first light touches the leaves, the wind seems to whisper the same lesson he once learned, that joy does not come from waiting for perfect conditions. It comes from the courage to plant, to nurture, to act, even when the outcome is uncertain. Maybe we too have been sitting at our own cliff edges, waiting for something that can only be built by our hands. Because happiness doesn't arrive with applause or thunder. It arrives quietly, like sunlight on new leaves, like the weight of a stone lifted again and again, like the peace that comes when we finally stop asking, "Where is my happiness?" and start asking, "What am I giving to life right now?" And in that giving, we find the thing we were waiting for all along. At some point, every one of us becomes that man on the mountain, waiting for something, a sign, a person, a moment, to finally make us feel complete. We tell ourselves, when I get there, when I fix this, when they understand me, then I'll be happy. But life, in its quiet wisdom, never works like that. Because happiness does not come after the pain. It's found inside it, in how we respond, in how we choose to act when no one applauds, in how we keep showing up when no one sees. Maybe happiness is not the light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe it's the candle we learn to carry while walking through it. Look around. Everyone you know is fighting a silent battle, longing to feel seen, to be enough, to rest. We build lives of appearance because we fear the truth of our own vulnerability. We run faster because slowing down might reveal what hurts. We fill our days with noise because silence might expose the questions we've buried for years. But the truth is this: silence doesn't break us. It brings us back. Stillness doesn't weaken us. It roots us in what's real. And vulnerability doesn't make us fragile. It makes us human. The Dalai Lama's words echo differently when you really sit with them. Happiness comes from your own actions, not from reaction, not from results, but from action born of awareness. Every small act of compassion, every moment you forgive, every time you choose to breathe instead of break, you are creating happiness, not just for yourself, but for everyone who crosses your quiet orbit. Because joy, when practiced, becomes contagious. It radiates through tone, through presence, through the smallest details of a day. And that is how real change happens, not through great declarations, but through the steady pulse of mindful living. We often think the world needs more perfection. What it truly needs is more presence. People who act with sincerity, who pause before reacting, who see others as mirrors rather than enemies. And perhaps that is the deepest paradox of all. When we stop chasing happiness for ourselves, we begin to feel it in everything we do. It slips quietly into the spaces between our breaths, into the way we listen, into the way we give without keeping score. It's not an explosion of joy. It's a soft returning, a recognition that life, even in its chaos, is enough. So when you wake tomorrow, don't wait for happiness to appear at your doorstep. Pick it up like the man stone, lift it with intention, and carry it through your actions. Smile at someone who doesn't expect it. Apologize where pride once lived. Forgive without announcement. Do something quietly good, and let no one know. Because happiness is not what happens when the world finally gives us peace. It's what we give to the world when we decide to live with peace inside. And maybe, just maybe, that's the moment the sunrise finally arrives, not outside us, but within. At the end of all searching, all striving, all questions, there is only this: a quiet return to the present moment. You don't have to chase happiness anymore. You don't have to prove you deserve it. You only have to notice the life unfolding before you, the sound of your breath, the weight of your body, the warmth of light falling across your hands. This is it, the miracle disguised as ordinary. Happiness was never something waiting in the distance. It was hidden in how you move through your days, in how you listen, in how you forgive, in how you stay open, even after the world has closed its doors. No one can give that to you, and no one can take it away. Because happiness, as the Dalai Lama said, is born from your own actions, not grand gestures, but quiet ones. A choice to be kind when it's easier to be cruel, to be patient when it's easier to rush, to stay present when escape feels safer. So before this video ends, pause, breathe, ask yourself, what action, no matter how small, could I take today that would bring more peace into my world? And then simply do it. No announcement, no waiting, just one conscious act. Because that is where happiness lives, not in the outcome, but in the doing. And maybe one day, when you look back, you'll realize that happiness wasn't something you found. It was something you became. Happiness was never something to receive. It was something to practice.